Well, I am totally excited tonight. How about you guys? I mean, we've had people drive in from Indiana. I mean, Dr. Gaither and his class from Ball State. Raise your hands. You know, this is exciting. Michigan, consultants from Michigan. Cincinnati, Kentucky, all over. So thank you for all of you who are coming out to support. For those of you that this might be your first time here, I want to welcome everybody out here tonight and just give you a little background. When I founded Pure Romance 25 years ago, I had a unique opportunity to have one-on-one conversations with women from all different walks of life. They confided in me with their problems and their fears and shared that there were nowhere to turn for answers. I envisioned a future where women were empowered to ask questions and demand answers regarding their sexual health. As my company grew, it became clear to me that resources in this area were seriously lacking. That's why I started the Patty Brisben Foundation for Women's Sexual Health. To date, we have raised over $4 million for research and education, and And you know what? I'm really proud because this year we're going to be granting over $350,000 to incredible institutions with innovative ideas to further this work. Last year, we launched a new initiative, a speaker series called Sexual Health Matters. In the beginning, we wanted to bring the community together with experts in the field. In our field, not just to learn, but to be heard. The outcome has turned into something truly magical. So many doctors have been willing to step up to the plate to be there to educate. The real heroes in this room are those of you who come to share and ask questions and give of yourself in the process. In turn, this event has become way more than I ever dreamed of, just like when I first started building Pure Romance. This evening, we continue the conversation. We begin in January on sexual wellness in our youth, turning our focus to puberty through adulthood. You know, last time, we started out discussing the talk. And you know the talk can be really hard. This isn't a conversation just for mom and daughter, or father or son. Both parents, mom and dad both, our same-sex parents need to get comfortable talking to their kids about changes that they are going through, regardless of gender. But speaking of gender, the world is not so black and white anymore. We're seeing more and more gender-expansive and gender-creative children. Let's talk about how we, as parents, can have conversations to lead our children into a better and more accepting future. What is it that we want for our children at the end of the day? Doesn't it all boil down to health and happiness? Let's open the lines of communication with our children so that they are comfortable to continue that open dialogue with us, and they can feel empowered to embrace their sexuality as a part of their overall healthy life. When you leave here tonight, you should feel more confident in having conversations with your children about their bodies and their physical and emotional changes that they're going through, understanding and embracing gender diversity, consent, navigating complex relationships, and unique challenges of sex education in this technologically driven age. With that, I am so excited to introduce you to this amazing panel. So you ready? I had drinks with some of these ladies the other night. They are not scared. I'm going to tell you what, I learned so much from them, and they're amazing. We're going to start here with Dr. Rula Kanj. She's an assistant professor in the Department of OB and Gynecology at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. Her focus in pediatrics and adolescent gynecology at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center is on contraception, transgender health, and menstrual irregularities. Dr. Sarah Pickle is an assistant professor at the Family Medicine of the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine, as well as a board-certified family medicine physician focused on adolescent and transgender care at UC Health. Lydia Bowers is a sexual health consultant with over two decades of experience working with teachers and administrators and parents. Wait till you talk to her tonight. And Dr. Shomo is an assistant professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine and practicing family medicine physician with an interest in preventative medicine and healthy sexuality. I'm thankful to each and every one of you for sharing your expertise with us here tonight. So, Dr. Kanj, we're going to be kicking it off with you. Question number 1. How can parents help to prepare teens for changes puberty puts their body through and help them to understand what's normal?
Thank you, first of all, for having me. It's a really important question because parents first need to know what's normal themselves, and we answer a lot of questions about this issue in our clinic. One of the important things to remind and reassure kids about is that everyone develops on a little bit of a different schedule. So kids are developing at different rates from their peers. They start at a different time, they may take longer to go through puberty or a shorter time. So it's also normal for different body parts to develop at different rates. For example, when girls start having breast development, it's very normal for one side to grow and become more painful before the other one. But this can be very alarming to parents, thinking that girls have a breast mass or that something is abnormal. So part of the reassurance that I have to do is kind of going through where kids are in their puberty at that moment and where we expect things to go from there. So I often encourage parents to talk to their pediatricians, make sure their kids are getting regular checkups so that they can make sure that things are on the appropriate timing and schedule. And if there is still a concern that something is developing abnormally or not quickly enough or more quickly than it's supposed to, then they can send them to us, and we're happy to do a consultation on kids. So reminding children that number one, their bodies are going to look and feel different as they go through puberty, that sometimes hands and feet grow before other parts of their bodies and that it's not going to match up with their friends, and that sometimes things being a little bit asymmetrical even as they become teenagers and adults is actually quite normal. So breast size, again, is a common one where they may never be exactly the same size, and that's okay. So reassuring children that where they are is, as long as they're developing on kind of the correct trajectory, then it doesn't really matter if their friends are faster or slower.
Okay, you see girls every day in your practice. What would you say is the most common misconception teen girls have about their bodies?
So probably that everybody's anatomy looks the same in the genital area. That's a really common one that we see, that the appearance of the genitals is going to look just like the images that they see in the media, and that those reflect untouched normal anatomy, which is definitely not the case. Also, another common misconception is that pubic hair is unnecessary and should be removed completely. That's a really common one too. That any kind of discharge from the genital area is abnormal. All of it seems to be disturbing to a lot of our teen girls. Another one is that urine and menstrual blood come from the same opening. They do not. And another common misconception is that vaginas are inherently unclean. Girls pay, and it's something we talk about quite a bit, is that these parts of the body don't need obsessive cleaning, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too, but that their anatomy is inherently abnormal if there's anything prominent about it, or that they're supposed to look like their friends. And sometimes that doesn't always come from them. Sometimes it comes from parents or cousins or others who say, well, mine doesn't look like that, thus yours must be abnormal. And so I have to do a lot of reassurance that, Mom, just because your labia doesn't look like that doesn't mean that hers is wrong. Why are you comparing anyway? She's 11, maybe just let her labia develop and don't worry about it. So we often, it's hard because a lot of girls just don't know their bodies. They haven't even looked, and I'm talking a lot about the genital area, breasts and everything too. There's a lot of body consciousness in girls and teenagers. But especially in the genital area, a lot of girls just don't know their anatomy, haven't been given the opportunity to become comfortable with it. So one of my roles sometimes is actually doing what we call teaching exams, where we use a mirror and show the girl, have her hold the mirror and actually look and point out things to her. And then sometimes girls are very uncomfortable with this, or they're nervous because they don't want to look at that part of their bodies, which also makes me sad, because I don't think that they should be ashamed of that part of their body and think, sometimes they're ashamed for us to look at it. I don't want anyone to see me down there. Why? Because it looks bad. Why does it look bad? It's this message that they're getting, that it's supposed to look a certain way, and that if they haven't removed every shred of pubic hair and have any visible labia, that that's wrong. So a lot of my role is reassuring them that these are the healthy parts, and this is what everything is called, so that you can feel empowered to tell your pediatrician or me, this is actually what's bothering me, and let's address whatever that issue is.
Well, you brought up hygiene. I just had a vacation with 2 teenage girls, and so let's talk about this. What should we really be teaching them? Because I love Lululemon. I think Lululemon is probably one of the most fabulous things, but they don't want to wash their Lululemon. They want to put it on the next day after wearing thongs. Is that wrong?
Short answer, yes.
Good.
It is. So this also comes up quite a bit because, like I said, there are a lot of misconceptions about proper hygiene in the genital area, basically involving the vulva and the vagina. And a lot of us who take care of girls and women often have to tell patients that the vagina is a self-cleaning oven, essentially. It does not need excessive anything going inside to clean it. It definitely does not need a Gwyneth Paltrow endorsed steaming. Thank you. And it does not need to smell like lavender or roses. So going back to my whole misconception of any discharge is abnormal, any odor is abnormal, our body parts are supposed to have certain smells. Yes, if there are things that we look for that are signs of an infection, and those are the things that I talk to a lot of my patients about, is what kind of things to look out for. Specific kind of changes, certain kinds of odors, the itching, irritation, burning, that's not normal. But just having discharge or having the smell of an area that's supposed to smell like that is not an abnormal thing. So, and in that kind of vein, we always advise people not to use any fragrance products in that area, not to use any douches. This is something that's still getting passed down against all of our best wishes from their mothers and grandmothers. And a lot of mothers that I see with their girls go, well, I didn't know that was bad. I thought that's what you're supposed to do because my mom taught me that too. So these are all myths we try to dispel. And it's not just that those things aren't beneficial, it's that they're actively harmful. They alter the pH of that area of the body and actually can increase the risk of infections. So besides that, we always tell them nothing needs to go inside there, clean gently on the outside. Lacy underwear and thongs are really not necessary when you're 12 anyway, but especially not when you're asleep. Girls and women should be sleeping without underwear, let things breathe. And the tights, especially without underwear too, that's way too much moisture trapping. So that
Exactly.
Also, so, yeah, clean underwear in between those, in between their body and the tights is important. Even simple things like wiping front to back, we sometimes have to reinforce. Apparently they don't teach that anymore when you're a little kid.
No.
Related to that, it is a problem, especially, well, it doesn't matter.
Oh, no, it matters. It matters.
Especially when you're transmitting things from back to front. Doesn't lead to good things. Also in regards to hygiene there too, a big thing that comes up with our girls a lot is shaving. So a lot of girls want to start shaving their pubic hair at young ages, before they've even had a period sometimes. And that is something that maybe comes from friends, maybe comes from media, not to blame everything on media images, but there is, again, this perception that pubic hair is unnecessary, but not just unnecessary, that there's something wrong with having it there and that it's supposed to be completely removed. So we do a lot of talking about safe shaving and what to do instead. For example, if somebody is bothered by the amount of pubic hair, or in some of our special needs girls, if it's harder for parents to help with hygiene with periods because the hair is getting in the way, we advise them to use trimmers and just cut the hair really short, going with the grain of the hair, so that you're not using a wet razor and going against the grain and creating all these little abrasions in the skin that can lead to infections. It's definitely not necessary to remove all the hair in that area of the body. There's a purpose of having hair there. It's protective. But if it feels excessive to girls when they're swimming or have other activities like that, it is okay to trim it down shorter. So those are all kind of things that girls end up coming to us with problems that are definitely easily preventable, like ingrown hairs that turn into infections, when we could have avoided that in the first place.
That's good. So we're talking about even talking to your children about, sometimes they think that they've heard from their friends that if they get like a itching down there, that they get a yogurt and rub down there, that it's great, or sitting in vinegar.
Yeah, no, don't.
I'm just letting you all know that
No.
these are things, if you don't have teenagers, you're going to hear this. So, yeah.
Yeah, so baths, actually, gynecologists we're not against baths, we're just against anything that goes in the bath. Bubbles, bath bombs, those are terrible. Vinegar, all kinds of things that we hear about people putting in the baths, there shouldn't be anything really in there. And there definitely shouldn't be anything going up inside, so.
Everybody? Okay. I know a lot of parents get nervous about putting their daughters on birth control, or even talking about contraception, for fear that it'll push them into having sex earlier. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really common concern that we see, and it can often be a barrier to girls getting the medications that they need because of parents being nervous about that. Fortunately, we have a lot of research that tells us that that is not the case. Talking to girls about birth control, starting them on a birth control medication, does not actually lower the age of their first sexual activity, and that's been well shown. And on a similar vein, talking about sex doesn't make them have sex earlier either. Just as the same way as talking about mental illness or bullying, that doesn't make them more prone to mental illness if you talk about it. These are really important conversations for parents and providers to be having with kids. And regarding starting those medications specifically, there are so many other benefits to these hormonal medications that we use that can really significantly impact the quality of life for girls. For example, I see some patients who have severe PMS, which there's a condition called PMDD that's related to PMS, but is a severe form that actually impacts their functioning on a regular basis. Every month, they have a week where they are not able to do the normal things that they're able to do. And some of these hormone medications can make a real difference in their quality of life, restore them to better psychological and physical functioning. And so, we're missing out on those benefits if we can't use these hormonal medications. And another thing I'll discuss with parents too is that even if these kids and teens don't need birth control at that moment, and we are all encouraging them to delay their first sexual activity, but even if they don't need birth control right now, it's good for them to actually be able to start on a method so that they can see if it works for them for the future, and potentially if they find that, let's say it's birth control pills or an IUD that works really well for them, they can continue that and have that in place before they need it for the additional benefit of birth control, if that makes sense. So at least they've had, it's not a, oh my God, she has a boyfriend, we need to start something right away, and then you start something and then there's terrible mood changes, and you're like, well, at least she's not pregnant. Yeah, but we could have started something. So I always encourage patients and their parents to, let's start something before you need it, so that you're ready, you're getting, they're older, et cetera, if they're open to that, and especially if they already have cramps. No one should have to deal with severe cramps for a week out of each month. No one should be crying in bed for the 2 days before their bleeding starts. But a lot of girls and their parents accept these things as being normal because, well, that's how my periods were when I was her age, and everyone told me to suck it up. There's so many benefits of these medications, and there are so many different options now too that we have that it's not like, well, I don't want her taking this pill, thus she shouldn't be on anything. We have a lot of things to talk about and offer, and it can really change, and improve girls' quality of life in a great way.
Thank you, Dr. Khan.
My pleasure.
All right, Dr. Pickle. Now that we've talked about some of the physical changes that are to be expected, we'd love for you to help us delve into relationships. Now, it can be really awkward for parents to accept that their babies just are not babies anymore. How many times have you heard parents joking about not letting their daughter date Dan until she's 30? So, how do we get comfortable and open up that dialogue with our children about entering into romantic and sexual relationships?
30, I've heard 40, 45. I've heard that age really get kind of pushed down the line. Well, thanks, Patty. I think one of the opening remarks that you made is that this is never a one talk, right? So as parents, we're never done after just the one talk. Woo, we check it off the list, we're done. Great. Now, these are continuous conversations, and as health professionals and educators, we're always encouraging our young patients who are coming in to engage those adults that are in their life that they feel safe with in these conversations. So we do believe that you are their allies, their best advocates, and you love these kids, so you want what's best for them. So we agree, we want you as part of that conversation. So the first part of Patty's question is, how do you open the conversation? And the first part is you have to recognize for your own self, what are your limitations talking about sex, sexuality, relationships? Because in order to understand how to communicate with your child, how are you communicating with your partner or partners? How are you communicating with your doctor about sex? We also recognize that people come to the table with past traumas, with past relationships that haven't been healthy. And so as parents, as physicians, sometimes we have to check our own experiences, our own biases, and kind of deal with our own stuff so that we can help our kids deal with that stuff as well. So I think the first part is figure out kind of what's going on with you and practice, right? If you try to engage in these conversations, and as doctors, we practice all the time. We teach med students how to practice, we practice, because if you go into these conversations without having said the word penis, vagina, labia, without turning bright red and stumbling over your words, it won't be comfortable for you, and it's not going to be comfortable for your child. Kids sense fear, right? They totally know when you're out of your comfort zone. So take the opportunity to get in your comfort zone. I think as far as opening the dialogue, you have to know your kid and also know who you are as a family. Some families are really open with sex and sexuality from early ages. Our last conversation in January really focused on how to nurture that in young folks, but that's not always the case. And so sometimes these first conversations are happening in early teenage years or later adolescence. So knowing kind of your family structure, your community, who are your kids' friends, really shape the kind of conversation that you're going to be able to have. I think one of the opening lines that you can use in any conversation where it might be just a little awkward is to frame it in that this is common and normal. So it's common for people your age to start to like other people, be romantically attracted to other people. Tell me about that for you. Or who do you like? Do you like boys? Do you like girls? Do you like everyone? Do you like no one? So really offering those conversations, not waiting for your young person to come to you, being that advocate for them and letting them know that it's a safe place. You could get a ton of different responses, right? Sometimes it could be like, Mom, why are you asking me, right? And then you can say, it's okay if you don't want to talk about this now, but I'm going to ask you again because I'm your mom, or I'm your dad, or I'm your grandma, or I'm your aunt, and I want to be part of this conversation. Is it okay if I ask you about this again? You know, asking permission to be part of this conversation gets you a lot of street cred. So, you know, asking to be part of this with your young person is another way to open that dialogue. Then you say, I'm still going to ask you because I'm your mom. Yeah, or that's a great question. But if they do, you know, if they're not going to feel comfortable talking to you, help them find a trusted adult that they will feel comfortable with. That could be a teacher, that could be their doctor. Send them to Dr. Shomo. She's amazing. But really, she's my colleague, so of course I'm going to say that, right? But help them find somebody. If you're not going to be their person, enable them to have that adult. If it's not you, then let it be somebody that you trust so that you know that they're getting good advice and advocacy when they need it.
Thank you. Is there a difference in how parents should have these conversations with a child identifying differently than their assigned gender?
So when we were here last time in January, we talked a little bit about the difference between sex and gender and sexuality. So just to kind of review, you know, those terms are different, and sex is assigned at birth, either based on presumed sex at birth, or, you know, it's a boy or it's a girl, sometimes even before birth through ultrasounds or other testing. And we think of sex as being binary, right? So male and female, but really sex in and of itself exists on a spectrum, and so there are individuals that have really complex combinations of hormones and chromosomes and body parts, and those individuals we may identify as intersex. So sex is along a spectrum, and the sex that somebody was assigned at birth does not always match with who they know they are, and that's gender identity, and we talked about how that evolves over time. So if somebody has a gender identity that is disconnected from the gender that they were assigned at birth, based on the sex they were assigned at birth, then the term we may use to describe that experience is transgender. And there's a lot of kind of terminology within that more inclusive and umbrella term. You may hear gender non-conforming, gender fluid, gender non-binary. So there's a lot of terminology that you know, culturally we're starting to kind of come into and have a better understanding that young people, and especially younger generations, have so much more information about gender spectrum, so they are coming to us with this expanding vocabulary. So if somebody's child identifies transgender or gender nonconforming, it's really at its core the same conversation as if they are cisgender, which means that there's alignment. So an example is, I am a cisgender female. I was assigned female sex at birth. I identify as woman, so I would use the term cisgender. So whether somebody's transgender or cisgender, the core of what we want for our kids, like Patty said, is the same. We want them to have good and healthy interpersonal relationships. We want them to value their body and have confidence in who they are. We want them to feel safe, to tell us when they don't feel safe. And we want them to be able to express who they are and express who they love, express who they are attracted to sexually or romantically. So I think the challenge for parents with gender nonconforming or gender fluid kids or transgender kids is that this conversation has a layer of complexity that parents aren't always prepared for, but that certainly we can prepare ourselves for. So I think going into these conversations, having an understanding that gender identity and sexual attractedness or sexuality are also different. So somebody who is transgender may be straight or gay or bisexual or pansexual or asexual. So, you know, gender is who you go to bed as, sexuality is who you go to bed with. So there's this dichotomy, these two different parts, and I think for parents of gender fluid or transgender kids, understanding that there's going to be these parallel conversations. Who are you? But who do you love, or who will you grow to love with time? So I think that is the challenge when it comes to talking about relationships, is there can be that extra dynamic.
Great. Are there any additional concerns when dealing with trans or gender nonconforming youth that parents of cisgender children don't typically address?
So I think parents and physicians alike, and teachers and educators who are caring for transgender youth need to be aware that transgender kids are at a higher risk of bullying and violence, and that can translate to sexual violence. And so recognizing that there may be other safety conversations within relationships, or within school settings, or within other team-based settings that we need to make sure that we're having with youth who are transgender. The other part is that when somebody is transgender, if they are developing sex characteristics, breasts or testes or pubic hair, or starting to have physical changes related to puberty that don't feel aligned to them, that don't feel right, that don't match with who they are, their experience of sexuality may be much more complex. So they may feel the desire to masturbate but not want to use the parts that they were born with because it doesn't feel connected to them. So I think understanding that those disconnections between the body and often self-identity can add another layer. There's also, if we're using hormones to help people kind of live that life that feels most authentic and to allow their body to match who they are, there can be changes in sexual health and sexual function that can occur as well. So part of our job is to prepare families for some of these physical changes that will happen and help people navigate that change in sexual health that can happen with gender-affirming hormones, for instance.
Awesome. What is the best way for parents to support a gender-expansive child? And what resources are there when parents need more information and advice?
So I said this last time, and I'm going to say it again, but the first thing to do is just to love your kid. That is the kind of baseline, bottom line, because everything else you do, every decision you make, every person you connect with is going to be based in that love, and so you're not going to do anything wrong. When I was teaching at the med school earlier today, and we had a panel of adults who were talking about their experience coming out to their family as gay, straight, lesbian, transgender, and some of these individuals were in their 20s, some were in their 70s. And the moment they told their loved ones that they were gay or that they were transgender, that moment, that first conversation, that first disclosure stayed with them. So 50 plus years from now, children remember what happens in that moment, and so to respond to that moment out of love, you won't go wrong. I think just like, my kind of opening line of getting comfortable with, who you are and your own sexuality means also finding resources for yourself as a parent. So in Cincinnati, we are really lucky that we have the Cincinnati Children's Adolescent Medicine Center that has a transgender program to help, whether it's gender expansive kids, so maybe we don't quite know yet if they're transgender or gender creative. They're maybe acting in ways that feel more diverse than what we would necessarily say are our cultural norms, although we're trying to change that, right? But we have so many resources. So if there are parents out there, or you know of parents who's your peer or your colleague or yourself just maybe need extra support, you can seek out care at Cincinnati Children's and meet with the team. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your child is transgender. If you're just looking for more information or just looking for some affirmation, that's a great resource we have here in the city. Online resources, there's an awesome very short document that was put out by some of the doctors at Cincinnati Children's and the American Academy of Pediatrics called Supporting and Caring for Transgender Children. And it gives some just like really great definitions, ways to talk to family about this, ways to talk to siblings about this, right? Because there's so many complex parts. Another great resource is called the Family Acceptance Project. So they've done a lot of research on what helps LGBTQ kids become awesome and successful LGBTQ adults. What do you think was the number one thing? Family acceptance. Love, right? So it starts in the family unit, and so finding a way to support kids in that journey, that is the best thing that you can do for your child. Welcoming Schools is another great resource to help kind of navigate some of the school dynamics that comes with having a gender fluid or a gender diverse kid, so lots of great resources. And the Cincinnati Children's website really links back to a lot of those resources, so if you were just going to go to one spot, that's what I would recommend.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Lydia, we're really excited to have you here to offer insight from your unique perspective as a sex educator. Sarah talked about how consent is an important part of sex education, regardless of gender identity. I know you're currently writing a series of children's books about consent and bodily autonomy. How can we best explain consent to our teens so they understand what they should expect of others and how to respect others as well?
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. A lot of times when we talk about consent, we think of it as theoretically a very simple thing. I ask permission, and if someone says yes, then we go for it, cool, right? And that if someone says no, you're not supposed to. We sort of think that's the end of it. It's a lot more nuanced. Consent is something that, again, we should be talking about from the very, very beginning. We talk about it with young children. We can model things like, may I give you a hug, and that they don't have to accept or give physical affection. So ideally, these are conversations we start much earlier so that we can build on them. If you haven't started that conversation, it's okay. It's never too late to start that conversation. When I teach about consent with educators and with parents, I give 5 steps of consent. So we're going to go through those today, all right? So the very first one is that I listen to my body. We don't think about that as being consent, but we can't give consent unless we know how we feel about what we're consenting to. Verbal consent isn't really consent unless you also have emotional consent. How many of us have said yes to something that we don't really want to do? Sexual or otherwise, we've all done that, right? And it often leaves us feeling sometimes used, sometimes we are angry at whoever asked us to do this. Sometimes we're angry at ourselves. Unless we're fully emotionally consenting as well, it's not really consent. And to do that, we have to listen to our own bodies. We have to acknowledge, what are the emotions that I'm feeling? How do I feel about this right now? Why do I want to kiss this person? Do I want to kiss this person? How do I want to kiss this person? There's a lot of things we kind of have to think through. And also, the other part of listening to our bodies is trusting our instincts. We don't always do that, right? And sometimes we'll be somewhere or be with someone and something just feels off, but I don't have any tangible proof something's wrong, so it must just be my imagination, right? And again, we negate our instincts and our feelings, and sometimes we end up realizing later that if only I had listened to that. So listening to our bodies, listening to ourselves, our feelings is really the first step of consent. The second step would be that I am in charge of my body. We talk a lot about this with preschoolers. I do a lot of training with early childhood educators, and we talk a lot about you're in charge of your body. You get to say whether or not you give a hug or receive a kiss. We also clarified that does not mean you get to opt out of diaper changes. Those happen no matter what. However, as children get older, and now we're into puberty and adolescence, being in charge of our bodies also comes with some responsibilities. We're responsible for our actions. We're also responsible to think through, what are my boundaries? What do I feel comfortable with right now? Where, if I'm about to be in a relationship, where am I okay with things going and things not going? Because we don't, especially when think about adolescents and they're just entering these things, and we don't think through those, and so often it's kind of, well, whatever happens next, and whatever happens next, and whatever happens next. And we don't really have a clear boundary saying, this is what I'm okay with. And part of being in charge of our bodies is knowing what we're okay with. I'm okay with my mouth touching their mouth, but that's the only place mouths can go for now. And if you don't have that, how quickly does that just tumble on into the next thing, right? So being in charge of our bodies means, yes, I get to say no, but also I know where I'm going to say no, and having that set. The third step is I ask permission, which just means we're asking permission, right? And whether that's with the little kids, whether that's giving a hug, whether that's older and, may I give you a kiss, it's important then that as the adults and as families, that we're also modeling that. And we can ask our children, may I give you a hug? And part of asking permission is also waiting for a response. Doesn't count if you just say, hey, may I kiss you, and go in for the kill. We have to wait for a response, right? How many of you have heard the phrase, no means no? Right? Yes. But does that mean everything else means yes? Silence and laughter do not mean yes, right? And we have to recognize that asking, hey, may I kiss you, or may I do whatever else, and there's a pause, does not mean you do it. And that's an important thing that for our children to recognize, and both as the person potentially offering or receiving, is that yes means yes, as long as you know you want it, but that the silence doesn't mean that. A lot of times we see this with tickling, whether it's the little kids, even whether it's bigger kids, and people tend to tickle, and they go, but they're still laughing, right? They're still having fun. How many of us laugh when we feel awkward or uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. I laugh all the time. It's terrible. I laugh when I'm angry. But we have these moments where we don't stop to think, okay, this laughter or a pausing doesn't mean we go ahead. So it's not just that no means no. No means no, but we also kind of need to consider that some of these other things mean no as well. Unless it's a yes, it's a no. And not an in-between, it's a no. So then the next step, if we've asked permission, is that I check in. And that's two-part. We're going to check in with ourselves, which kind of goes back to step one. Am I still enjoying this? Do I still feel safe? Because consent can always be revoked. It can always be taken back. I know there's a state that's trying to pass a law that it can't be. I don't care what North Carolina or South Carolina says. Consent can always be revoked. So I'm going to check in with myself. Again, do I feel okay with this? Am I still enjoying this? Am I still having fun? We also have to check in with the other person. If we're involved in a romantic situation or sexual activity with someone else, it's supposed to be something that we're doing together, right? It's not a solo act. Sexual activity can be a solo act. However, if it's with someone else, it's not a solo act. So we're going to check in with them as well. Are you okay? Are you still enjoying this? Hey, I really like kissing you. You want to kiss some more? Or do you actually want to watch some of this movie for a while? There is a Netflix part to Netflix and chill, But we can check in with them as well, because if we're entering into this, into sexual activity with someone, it has to be that we're respecting them as well. And so we check in. this is also the point where we have to talk with our children about the nonverbal communication that may happen. If we are with a partner or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whoever, and someone's saying yes, but their face says otherwise or their body says otherwise, we can check it. Hey, what's going on? Let's talk about this. Because teaching our children to check in with themselves, to recognize how they're feeling, to be empathetic towards someone else and say, hey, are you all right? This seems that maybe you're feeling this way, means that we're setting up the stage for children to have healthy relationships, right? The final step is that I accept no. Because part of consent means that if you don't have consent, you can handle it appropriately. How many headlines have we seen lately where it's, they shot up the school because they were rejected. She said no to going to prom, so I'm gonna go do this. All these people are killed because too many women wouldn't go on a date with me. We have to learn how to accept no. And we have to talk through that with our children. We have to talk through, okay, you put yourself out there, whether it's asking someone out on a date or whatever, and they've said no, it's not on them. They are not the mean person for rejecting you. They're not, oh, well, they're not worth it. That doesn't count in this situation. If they've said no, it's on you to deal with that, right? It's on you, if you have received that no, to process those emotions. This is not a try again situation. Most romantic comedy perseverance situations are really just stalking. You know, standing outside with the boombox is a nice romantic gesture, but if she said no a few times, what works in a movie, that's not real life. That's not okay. We have to teach our children, how do we handle this? How do I take responsibility for my emotions when I'm sad, when I'm angry? Because it's okay to be sad or angry. It hurts when we're rejected, and that's okay. It's fine to be angry if you're rejected. Those are fine feelings, but what do we do with them, right? And whether that's super emotional, mope in your room and listen to the saddest songs and write emo poetry, that's great, if that's how you process it. However you handle it, talk through options, what works for you. But part of consent means that we have to process and accept how to handle no as well. So those are the 5 steps of consent that I try to teach. It makes consent seem a little more complicated, but there's a lot of nuances to this. Consent is very intertwined with empathy and respect and emotions, and it's important that we do that and have those conversations with our children.
I thought I turned my phone off. Sorry. So I know the other night when we were out, we were talking about, what was that song that you listened to on your first breakup?
Toni Braxton's How Could an Angel Break My Heart? On repeat, until my mom came in weeks later and said, Lydia, you have to turn that off. I cannot listen to that song one more time. Yeah, thank you, Patty.
I just wanted you to share that. I'm sure there's others in this room that has listened to that same song. I'm always give fair warning, so it's going to get a little hotter in here because this statistic here just blew my mind. This is on teenagers who have experienced sexual assault in their young lives. This is staggering. Are you ready? 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually assaulted before the age of 18. How is it that we can help protect our teens? And what can we do to support them if there's been a trauma?
So, now we have the heavy part. Consent. When we're teaching these foundations of consent, it takes care of a few areas. A lot of times when we look at abuse prevention, we frame it as, how do I prevent my child from becoming a victim, right? But we have to also consider, how do I also prevent my child from becoming the perpetrator? Because every perpetrator was a child. Every perpetrator was or is an adolescent. We have to come at it holistically. Because when we think of abuse prevention as, don't wear that, don't go here, don't do this, walk with your keys between your fingers, all the things we say, here's how you protect yourself, or here's how you don't put yourself in this situation, we put the burden on the potential victim. It is not the victim's responsibility to end and prevent abuse, right? It can't be. It has to be something that we talk about in much bigger ways. Mental health services in our country are not fantastic. We have to make sure that there's proper support there. But when we talk about consent, and when we talk about it as more than just, hey, may I? Yes, you may. But when we think about these things about respect and empathy, we are teaching how for children to be empowered, to know their boundaries, to be able to say no, to trust their instincts to say, okay, something doesn't feel right, I'm getting out of here, and that's good, that's part of it. But we're also teaching this is how and why we respect someone else. And this is how I will empathize with you and recognize that no matter how much I want to kiss you, I can put myself in this position and say, if somebody were doing something else to me that I didn't want, I wouldn't like it, so I won't do it to you. We have to teach empathy. That's such a critical piece. And when we teach things like how to appropriately handle rejection, rejection does not mean that you go and make them do it more or you try to convince them, right? Because preventing abuse is just as much, how do we teach children not to break those boundaries? There was recently a study that's just come out in the last few years from Columbia University that showed that students who had had some form of consent and relationships education were 50% less likely to be sexually assaulted. 50%. So when we have statistics like 1 in 4 and 1 in 6, and we have a proven way of cutting that in half, why wouldn't we? Now, obviously, consent is not a cure-all, it's not a fix-all, it's not a magic button. If only it was. If an adolescent has been sexually assaulted, I think this goes back to what you were saying about first love your child. The first things that they need to hear is that I believe you, and it was not your fault. Sorry. Those two things, say them on repeat. I believe you, and it was not your fault. They have to hear that from you. You are their safe people. They have to know that from you. Those are things that are insidious thoughts that get in. I did something wrong, I caused this, and what if nobody believes me? What if everybody believes them? I believe you, it's not your fault. Now, there are resources out there. There are some websites you can go to. The National Sexual Violence Resource Center is a great one, especially if you're not in Cincinnati. In Cincinnati specifically, I know the Tri-Health hospitals have a specific rape and abuse center. They have people on call constantly. Children's Hospital has the Mayerson Center, which they have a child abuse team, and there's things like therapy. I don't know about the university, but I'm imagining probably the three of you have a good idea. Okay, so they have the sexual assault nursing examiners. That's the official name. So it is important to get help. Sexual assault leaves lasting damage. That may be physical, it may be emotional, it may be psychological. It's important to get help. That's hard to get help. And if you're alone, it's even worse. So as parents, as families, again, we have to be that support. We have opportunities to cut some of those statistics in half, and we can have these conversations. The other critical thing is that we can't suddenly be willing to talk to our children only when assault happens. The first moment they come home saying, I have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and we want to scream internally, because I'm not ready for this, that's fine. We all scream internally, or we laugh hysterically internally. We're laughing awkwardly and uncomfortably. But again, if we can tell our child, okay, well, tell me about them. I have a 13-year-old, and so when she announces, I'm going out with someone, my next question is, tell me what going out means to you, right? Because going out means something different in every grade. But to have these conversations, and it's easy as well, when, especially young adolescents, but even older ones, we see this where we kind of downplay their relationships. Oh, it's puppy love. Oh, it's this. And sure, it's not the extent that as adults we may feel, but these are still very real feelings, right? They're still very real. They're very big feelings. And when we downplay that, they quickly learn, you're not someone I can talk to about this. So why would I come to you if something happened? You don't believe me that I'm in love with this person, and maybe you don't, but you keep it quiet. Because if you don't believe them about that, what else do you not believe them about, right? So supporting our children for possible sexual assault also means that we have to have these conversations with them. Everything we're talking about up here tonight, and we've got to have those conversations the whole time and keep helping our children understand that we are people that they can come to. Alcohol and drugs. Okay, so quick addition. So with things like alcohol and drugs, there are still obviously things that we need to talk about our children as preventative measures, right? And how to make safe choices. Because there are things that we need to do. How do we and have these conversations? Because making safe choices not only is going to include, hey, something feels off, I need to get out of here, but what am I doing? What am I participating in? And what are the results of these things? So yes, thank you. Because there are still things where we have to have conversations about that as well. And again, if we can be someone that our child can come to, we can have these conversations openly, then we can, where they can trust us to talk through some of these things. And how do you feel? How do we as a family, what are our values? About drugs and alcohol, for example? Children aren't robots. We can't program them to have whatever output we wish they would. Make things a lot easier, but they don't, right? They are going to make their choices and their decisions, and our job is to help set them up for that. I like to use the analogy of gardens instead. We are doing the gardening for a long time, but our job is to teach them so they take over their garden, right? And so talking about those things and having conversations, this is why we feel the way we do about alcohol. This is the rules we have. This is why we believe what we do about drugs. And giving them that support from the beginning so that hopefully those are values then that become sort of ingrained in them and that they take on as their values as well. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I told you this was a great panel, did I not? They don't mess around. All right, Dr. Shomo, are you ready? Because I have got a load of questions. So buckle up. I'm ready. I want to thank you for being here. Do you know she has a YouTube channel? Dr. Shomo knows. You discuss all sorts of sexual health matters as they relate to teens. Now, you and I know that every relationship is different, but our kids, they're just entering into this confusing world of dating and relating to others in new ways. How is it that we prepare our teens and help them to navigate what a healthy relationship looks like?
So I encourage people a lot to practice conversations. And really, so I'm not a parent. I have like 20 nieces and nephews, and I helped raise my brother and all types of other children in my family. I'm from a large family. And one of the best gifts I ever received was my large family and my older sisters talking to me about, sex. Because one of my sisters got pregnant at age 16, And I was 12 when she got pregnant, and my sisters just unleashed all types of unsolicited advice on me. But as I got older and, the things that they told me to prepare for were going to happen, I was very grateful for all the unsolicited advice that they gave to me. So I think that you have to, I read a lot. I have a book club as well. And so when I read I read a lot of biographies. And it's amazing to me that in every single autobiography I've read, the people have talked about how their parents talked to them about sex. And it's very successful people. Michelle Obama, Trevor Noah, Gabrielle Union. And Gabrielle Union was raised Catholic, and apparently they didn't talk about it at all. So she talked about her experience of not having it and actually taking one of her friends to an abortion clinic. They had a group field trip to an abortion clinic. It's very amazing to me that a lot of successful people remember what their parents told them about sex, and I'm happy that they wrote about it. It's a lot of small conversations, and I remember Trevor Noah in his book. He talked about how his mom would say, when you love a woman, make sure that you're passionate with her. And he was just like, I'm 10, and she was telling me all types of stuff I didn't want to know. But it was kind of like me when I was 12 with my sisters, when they were telling me, they were telling me explicit things like, I'm going to tell you one thing they told me was, do not, if you ever are, if a guy ever tries to convince you to come to their house to go down on you, and they're just going to try to have sex with you, don't go, don't do it. So they would tell me specific things and give me advice. And it was good advice, because it did happen at points in my life where people tried to pull the okie doke on me, and I said, nope, my sisters told me this was going to happen, and I'm not fall for it. So they just would tell me all types of things. So I think that you just kind of have to get comfortable with just using different examples, like in the news. So the news is definitely full of, all types of sex scandals these days. So it's very easy to engage students, patients, your kids in your life. So just engage them in whatever you're seeing on TV, even if it's not the news and if it's just a TV show. What do you think about this relationship that these people on the show have? So the biggest thing, like you said, is, not call it puppy love, and know that they're having very serious relationships. I met my husband when I was 18 years old. We've been together for 16 years. So, those relationships that start at a very young age can be very serious and can be long-lasting. So it's important to prepare them for, I was very prepared when I met my husband for, the kind of conversations I want to have, for the kind of man that I wanted to have in my life. And my dad, of course, helped, me know what was acceptable and that sort of thing. So you have to make sure that you are just being honest with kids and not scaring them, because my sisters really didn't scare me. They didn't tell me anything that was, they just were trying to, give me good advice about what to do and what not to do. But they also let me know I could always come to them, because my parents, I was raised a Muslim, so it's kind of being like Catholic too. So my parents never talked to me about anything, but my sisters definitely did talk to me about it, because like I said, one of my sisters ended up getting pregnant because we weren't having conversations about it.
That's awesome. In today's tech-based world, how is social media affecting our youth? As parents, should we be setting up controls on their devices?
Yeah. So when they're very young, not very young, but when they're probably, in elementary school, it's easier to have controls, to be able to do that. Once they start getting into middle school, it can be very difficult because they're smart. They know about technology a lot more. They know about it even in 5th and 6th grade, so you have to be a little bit trickier. So what sometimes people may do is set up like fake accounts and monitor what their kids are doing. So that's another way to kind of monitor what they're doing. But with social media, the biggest thing that has changed is that you have this really fast and powerful way to meet people that you don't know. And there are a lot of dangers involved with that. And so you have to try to make sure you have conversations with your kids about, what would you do if somebody, I don't know if you guys know about sliding in the DMs, but that's one of the things that happens on Facebook, mostly on Instagram though, that's what it's called, direct message. So, you can talk to them about, what if somebody DMs you and says, you look really nice, let's meet up somewhere, what are you gonna do? So just kind of having these conversations and preparing them for what would they say to somebody if that happened to them. And what if the person was really cute? What would you say then? And trying to make sure that if they met somebody online and they wanted to go on a date for say with them, maybe they should take a friend. Maybe they should take you. you know. My sisters also did that. One time I wanted to go over to some guy's house, and my sister said, I'll take you, you know. So she took me over there, and we hung out, and we left, you know. so it's just part of, you know, trying to encourage, you know, what healthy behavior is and what that looks like. And trying to make sure that they have a good friend group, because I have, you know, 5 sisters, but not everybody has that support system. So if you know their friends and their parents are their friends and know what kind of people they're around, that's one of the most important things, is just knowing that they have a good friend group and knowing that all of the parents are on board about, you know, what kind of things they feel are acceptable, what kind of conversations that you're having with your children and the youth in your life, and just trying to, you know, create a supportive environment. Because the biggest thing is a lot of parents, number one, forget what they were doing when they were young. But number two, they act like this is, you know, that they're never going to have sex until they're 45 years old. So you have to be realistic and know that, number one, you should talk to them about all the people who claim to be having sex or not. A lot of times they're lying, and everybody, right. You know, the big thing is, oh, well, such and such is having sex, so I need to have sex, and probably they're not having sex. So just letting them know that most people wait until they're usually in college or on their way to college to have sex, and that's what's normal for a lot of people, but that may not be what you want in your family. So just kind of giving them expectations of what we do in our family and what is going on around you is a lot of, you know, people lying and trying to keep up with each other and outlie each other, that sort of thing. It's not real. But also just giving them the support to know that it's okay. You're gonna have sex one day, and when it happens, I'll be here to answer your questions, and I want you to come to me and ask me questions and to know that I will support you and have an open relationship with you. And if you can't do that, designate somebody who shares the same values to be that person for them to come to and, you know, get any kind of assistance they need. If they need to get birth control, if they need to get condoms, if they need to get, you know, dental dams, anything that they need, just let them know that this person is going to be the person you should talk to about it, or I'm going to be the person you should talk to about it, and just being there for them.
Okay, speaking of this control, despite our best efforts, there's a strong possibility that our children will find access to porn. Without shaming them, how can we talk about them and what they're really viewing in relationships into the relation of reality?
Yeah, so that's another big thing of why the reality is skewed for a lot of kids. So social media skews reality, porn skews reality, and a lot of reality TV that's not reality also skews their reality. So just trying to talk to them about porn in general, like bring it up. A lot of kids are seeing it. So Sarah and I were just talking about, or Dr. Pickle and I were just talking about how when we were young, the internet was so slow that there would be no way that you would ever be able to watch your pornography on dial-up internet. And then somebody calls and the phone goes out, you know. So now, because of technological advances, there's a lot of access to porn. And the statistic article that just published last month said that 64% of young people between ages 11 and 24 have seen porn within the past week. So a lot of them are seeing it, and so just bring it up. And the biggest thing about porn, the kind of conversations you can have around porn are, what are you learning from it? A lot of times they're thinking that that's how sex is gonna be. They're thinking that that's, you know, how they should practice, that sort of thing. But when you look at pornography, a lot of times it has a lot of negativity built in it. Number one, people's genitalia do not look like that in real life. So that's the number one thing. That's really what's driven a lot of the, you know, shaving and waxing, that sort of thing, is because they want to look like, you know, porn stars. And that's what they think is normal. So just letting them know that that is not normal, with the way their bodies look. And then also talking to them about the dynamics, the relationship dynamics of what they are learning about, especially women. Women are degraded a lot in porns, and they are part of the reason why people get confused about consent, because a lot of the times they will, you know, pretend they don't like it, and then they'll say, well, I guess this is still happening, so I guess I'll pretend to enjoy it. So they get a lot of mixed messages from pornography about how consent happens, about how pleasure happens, and just a lot of just a lot of negativity. So I would say just try to bring it up and try to have conversations about, what they learn from it and what questions they have about it, and, let them know that it's not real, and try to ask them if they want, more real life examples and more. So one of the things that in Judy Blume, one of the things that Gabrielle Union talked about in her book was about Judy Blume, and how she had a lot more realistic examples of pornography, because she said back then that people were watching porns in California, I guess, but on videotapes in high school. But she said that there was a video by Judy Blume that was more realistic, like realistic bodies, what they look like, what sex is actually going to be like. Real sex is awkward. That's the number one thing that young people need to know. It's not going to be this whole performance and, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be awkward. That's okay. That's normal. But so just trying to help walk them through, like, what's reality and what's not reality is how you can use porn to have useful conversations.
Okay, so I told you I just had vacation with 2 teenagers. This was really a learning lesson for me. So we were driving in the car heading to a restaurant, and they started talking about somebody on Instagram, and oh my God, she's still sending those nude photos to, so I said, who is sending these nude photos? So they were like, oh, Mimi, this is a big thing. I mean, girls, I just have one question. Have any of you 2 sent them? People lie, but I told them there isn't anything you do you don't get caught, because I truly believe that.
Yeah.
So I will scan everything I possibly can and find if any one of them ever, I'll kill them. But, and you all, the ones know me know that would happen. But we really got into a really in-depth conversation about this. And what's going on?
Yeah.
Help me out here.
Yeah, this is something that Aziz Ansari talked about in one of his stand-ups, where he talked about how he asked, how many women in the crowd have received, a penis picture, which he used the other word. And all these women raised their hands, and he said, guys, why is this a thing? Stop it. They don't want that. They don't want to see that. Stop sending them pictures. And so I think that, I don't know why it's happened, but I think probably because of camera phones. Like also when I was young, there was no such thing as a camera phone and a text message or a cell phone in general. But so I think that having the easy access to cameras, and people probably got curious and it kind of caught on. But I think that for a lot of young women, the biggest thing is just knowing that they don't have to. It's the same thing with consent. Like if somebody pressures you and asks you for a picture of you naked, number one, you don't know what they're going to do with that picture. They may show it to all of their friends.
Right.
You may come into school one day and everybody's seeing your picture of you naked. So if you don't want that to happen, don't send it. So that's pretty much don't send it, because that could happen, and it probably will happen.
Even if you think, I can totally trust this person, they
Yeah.
would never do it.
Yeah. Yes, trust no one. No. Not with your naked pictures. Not the cloud, not nothing. Don't even put them in the cloud. So it's just important to just tell them that is not appropriate for them to really do at all. I don't know why it's such a pervasive thing in our culture. But I think that for a lot of women, especially, they feel pressured by things that they think that other people will do. Well, if I don't send this new picture, then somebody else will. Well, let them go to the next person. I feel like as women, we tolerate a lot of things, and we have the power to shut it down. If we said, nobody's sending any more nude pics, it would not be a thing anymore. So I think that we need to be empowered to just say, no, not doing that. If you want to see me naked, we're going to be naked in person, I don't know why you need that on your phone, so.
Good answer. I'm going to file that one. All right. So I'm going to kick back here, and I am going to start off with the most frequently asked question that I got after our last panel. And that was, what is the appropriate age to give my daughter a vibrator or give my son a masturbator, the sleeve? So I'm going to tell you, I'm starting this, I'll turn it over to the doctors, and you can take it for what it's worth. I've been in this industry since 1983, started my own company in 1993. When I started in this industry, my oldest one was going on 8 years old. My baby was 2 months old. So, I became quite comfortable with talking about sex and sexuality by the time it was really time to open that platform up to my children. There have been many days that I have walked into my boys' bedroom and picked up socks that can stand on their own, towels, t-shirts, but never one time did I feel that I needed to drop off a sleeve and some lubricant in the room. I have always kept an open relationship. Are you guys okay back there too, my sons?
I forgot we were both here.
I'm going to tell you another little story about my daughter. So remember, many of you that are consultants in this room, remember several years ago, we had what was called a Vibe pillow. Do you remember the Vibe? I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So we were at the house and we were doing filming in my home that day. And this Vibe pillow had this little secret zipper. It was like a no-show zipper. And you could put your bedroom toys in it. So after I finished, I thought, oh, this is so pretty. I just redid my daughter's room. I'm going to go put it in her bedroom because, she can I'll teach her that she can hide her money or her jewelry or anything like that. So here this pretty little pillow sat, never thought anything about it. And that afternoon, I heard them coming through the door, her friends, and her boyfriend, what she called her boyfriend at the time. They went running upstairs. She goes, Mom, I'm going to show my friends my new bedroom that you just did. I said, okay, great. And all of a sudden, I heard this wail of a scream. I'm like, what is going on upstairs? I ran up the steps, and she had tears, and she was mortified. And I said, what's wrong? When I was doing the demo that day for the cameras, I forgot to take the vibrator out. So, and the boys are back here, they can tell you every Christmas it's still brought up, my mother did this. On a little bit more serious side, how many times have you been in ordering rooms and have had women come in to talk to you and say, you know what, I'm angry because I really don't know my body parts. My mother threw a manual at me or a book at me or suggested I read this, but I never felt that I could come in and have that conversation with my mom or my dad or anybody for that fact. I know I've had the conversation with my sons. How would it have felt if I would have laid a masturbator sleeve and a lubricant on your nightstand? They said, that wasn't in your place to do so. If we wanted it, we know we could have came to you, or we could have went and stole out of my bins. They just came and took things out and sold it at school. I know that factually.
So resourceful.
So,
Business people. Yeah.
what I'm saying to you, this is exactly why I'm bringing these panels to you, because it's so important. You guys are amazing. You're here tonight. But do you know how many parents cannot have that conversation because they're not comfortable? How many women go into their gynecologist and don't even know their body parts, don't feel empowered to talk about it? I want to change all of that. But I'm not giving anybody permission to go up to any one of your children and say, hey, let's talk about a vibrator today. If you have these open-ended conversations and build that trust with your child, they can come and ask you for anything or about where to purchase or what should I do. But let them make the decision what the right time is. So that's my take on this. I'm going to turn it over and see what my physicians have to say. How do you feel?
So I'm the non-physician, but I'll start. There's a sex educator whose work I love. His name is Al Vernacchio.
Oh, yeah, I read his book too.
Right? For Goodness Sex. It's fantastic. But one of the things he talks about is when we're talking with children about, or adolescents, children, when am I ready to have sex? What he always tells his students is that unless you are able to look your sweetheart in the eye and have a conversation about it, you're not ready to do it. So I would put that on parents as well. If you are not able to sit down and have a conversation and ongoing conversations with your child about sexuality, about bodies, about masturbation, you're not ready to buy them a sex toy. Because it is something you have to go on. One thing I know in the last panel, because I had watched the filming of it, I know it was posed as that it's illegal for adolescents to have them, and it is not. I just want to clarify that. It is not illegal. The issue where it gets into legality is under 18, you can't go into a sex toy store because they also sell pornographic material, right? That's what you can't sell. That's what under 18 can't purchase. You can buy it online. That's true. They're not questioning that.
You can from Pure Romance.
And so some of it's a legal protection. However, another fun fact in the state of Ohio is that, and not that you would or should, but that if you're the parent, you actually can purchase porn for your child or go with them to buy it. It's legal to do so. Again, legality and whether you should are very different, but just wanted to clarify, because I know someone had asked that whether or not they can even have it. It's not illegal. They are allowed to have them. So
I think from the standpoint of empowerment, if your youth is having questions about experiencing sexuality and they ask about a vibrator or they ask about masturbation, for those to be open dialogues and open-ended conversations, but the understanding too that sometimes there are medical reasons as well that young people might need dilators or vibrators because of gynecologic conditions too. So again, that there is not shame in experiencing orgasm or sexual pleasure or sexuality of youth. So we do always kind of, walking that fine line of never making anybody feel bad for wanting to experience their own body, and making sure that we are, doing the right litmus test for our families and for our kids of what do they need in order to be confident in their body so that they can do those very, very important check-ins with themselves, right? Because if they don't know what feels good, how will they know when to say no to a partner? That does not feel good. So I think we do have, it's an important skill that we have to be able to embrace in our kids, this idea of masturbation. Thanks.
I agree as someone who takes care of a lot of teenage girls. Vibrators and other sex toys can be a really important part of them discovering their sexuality and can make them feel more comfortable with their bodies, knowing what actually gives them pleasure and what is kind of more meaningful to them in a sexual relationship. But that is different than a parent gifting you a vibrator. That may not be the way that a girl or a boy wants to actually experience or explore their body. That can actually be more of an overwhelming imposition. It's like, wait, I'm not even ready for this. That's not even something that I would have considered at this point, but they may be ready for themselves. So I think taking the perspective of letting the teenager initiate that more. And if they don't feel comfortable asking their parents, which I know a lot of my patients may not feel like they can even talk to their parents about anything sexual, but some actually do have open relationships with them, and you can see the difference in the questions that they're able to ask in front of their parents and the questions that their parents ask. It's a really different kind of dynamic, and it's really nice to have that openness if you can, so that it can be driven more by the child or adolescent themselves.
Maybe we all need to have Dr. Shomo's sister.
Yeah,
Well, if you could just leave her number,
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll all use her.
she definitely is still the same. She has 4 children, and she's been very, very awesome mom with her kids as well. So just happy to have her, but
It's awesome. Okay, well, it's come to that time. So you have an amazing panel here. If you step up to the mic, we're going to start taking questions. Who wants to start? Just walk up to the mics. Do you have a mic? There, here, and over here.
Hello. Okay, so this is a question I actually asked someone back home because I'm one of the Indiana people, but I never got an answer to it. So how frequently should females or males replenish their underwear? Because my parents are always like, change your socks every 6 months, but nothing's ever said about underwear and how that affects our hygiene.
Oh, I thought you were asking to change their underwear.
No.
You mean
Like our underwear drawer.
I was like,
Turn
every 6
over
months.
the supply.
That's what
you mean the supply of?
Yeah,
Got
every
it.
sock supply.
It's like, please, at least every day.
As often as you would like to buy them. So
Yeah, but
Enough that you can change it every day.
Yes, exactly. That's the thing. There should at least be a supply of. So the reasons to, I get what you're asking, I guess, is when to get rid of underwear, and there's not really a defined lifespan of underwear, but reasons to get rid of it would be if the fabric is damaged. Because what I see in a lot of my girls, especially the ones who are shaving, waxing, etc., is that if there's more friction there, then they're more likely to get irritation of the vulvar area, etc. So keeping it not with holes in it, clean cotton material. But in terms of a lifespan, I think if it's starting to fall apart, it's time to get rid of it. It's not like, socks, I tend to believe the same thing. I have to throw away socks in my household sometimes because they have holes in them, and I'm told by my husband and children that these are totally fine because they still cover most of my foot.
yeah.
No.
If it's lost its function, then it's probably time to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much. You guys were awesome this evening. I have a 14-year-old boy on the spectrum. He has autism, cerebral palsy, ADHD, processing disorder, it goes on and on. The biggest issue that I have with Tyler, he has a really hard time learning lessons, understanding no. He does learn eventually, but because he has autism, we have to really paint a picture. I don't want to use the word victim, but I had an experience with date rape, horrible. It was the worst you could imagine, and I don't want to paint that picture for him. Is there some other way that you would recommend that I teach my son without having to draw something so dramatic? Because boundaries is so important, but with his sexuality, he seems to be extremely uncomfortable with me, with my husband. We do take him to a psychologist once a week, but what would you recommend?
There is a large curriculum which is extremely expensive, but it's called Circles, and there's an app for it, which for an app it's very expensive as well. It's like $20 to $5. Who spends that on an app? However,
It's worth it.
the idea is it gives a visual. In this circle, here are these kind of people, and this is the kind of acceptable touch that can happen with this in this circle. In this next circle, these are the people in here, whether that's, so you may have family or, in another circle may be teachers, and a different circle may be public servants, firefighters, police officers, and so it puts these all in different circles to sort of say, here are the different levels of touch that are okay, and it's designed for children with disabilities and more like on the severe end of the spectrum, but to have a picture to say, this is what's okay for me to touch, this is how it is or is not okay for these people to touch me, because that's another, right? That's a problem as well. Are they gonna do something inappropriate because they don't realize it, and what if, children with disabilities have much higher abuse rates, right? I know there are several other websites with information. I can talk to you later. I don't know those off the top of my head, but that's one that I know is designed to have a visual for that kind of thing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a question?
Yes. So I'm a provider and a parent, and I just had a question about like males in particular in genital exams. I've had a lot of males who refuse to, let us look in the private area. Is that something you should just put off for the next exam, or should it be like, I don't want to say make them do it, but it is important to look, but at least how would you approach that?
Can I talk about this? I used to work at Job Corps for quite a few years, and that was part of our exam. And it's kind of still somewhat of a consent. So what I would do a lot of times is I would, say I'm supposed to do this, but if you don't feel comfortable with that, I can just explain to you what you're supposed to look for. And so a lot of times, by the time I finished explaining what I was looking for, a lot of them would want me to look because they would be freaked out. I was talking about hernias, testicular torsion, testicular cancer, and a lot of times they're like, oh, let me just look. But sometimes they didn't, and if they didn't, that was okay. But, at least let them know what they should be looking for, because a lot of times when we do the genital checks, they have no idea what we're looking for. And if they ever came across a problem, they wouldn't even know what to do. So I think that the education is probably more important than the actual look.
Thank you.
And that goes for, I think, all individuals. The approach to any type of sensitive or intimate exam in the setting of a physician's office is it is our responsibility to talk about, why are we doing this? Is this okay? And that's, for younger kids, where we can talk about safe touching and we can talk about personal boundaries, but that we use that examination and when it might be medically necessary or not necessary in order to really guide them through what it means to have a conversation about their genitals. So we can actually help model that for them during those office visits, during their adolescent visits, or if they're coming in with concerns or problems. So we take that responsibility really seriously. As physicians, we are educators of your children as well, and when they come to see us as as patients, we feel like we are on your team. So we're going to kind of meet you and your kids where they are in that education way.
For a lot of the patients I'm seeing for the first time, sometimes people are coming to us specifically because there is a concern about the genital area. Usually that's the younger patients. And then sometimes the older ones or the young teenagers, actually part of an important part of sort of our initial assessment is what I kind of call a well check. And it's just an external look for the most part at the genital area. Sometimes that's the first visit, and sometimes we just talk about what that involves, and I say, this may feel like a lot for you because you're just meeting me for the first time, so maybe when I see you again for, in 3 months to follow up on this medicine we're starting, we'll do the well check then. And it seems that once they realize what that involves, they tend to feel a lot more comfortable with it. And especially for the younger ones who may not have even heard about, what it means to consent to something or to be able to give permission for someone to look at that part of their bodies, I try to always follow, we always do follow that model of basically saying, we need to look in this private area, whatever term they use to refer to it, or just in the private area. But I want you to know that it's only okay because I'm a doctor and this is the nurse that I work with, and your mom or whoever their guardian is that's there says that it's okay, and that you say that it's okay. And if at any point during the exam you feel uncomfortable, I want you to tell me and we will stop. And does that make sense to you? And if they're 2 or 3, they may get some of that, but maybe not. The 4, 5, 6-year-olds, though, that really tends to, they get what that means. They're like, okay, so I can tell, okay, that makes more sense. And so there's a lot of back and forth even while I'm examining them is, when I touch your leg, does that hurt? No. Okay, so now I'm gonna touch more in the private area, so I want you to tell me if that hurts. And sometimes they jump, but they go, but it didn't hurt though, I was just nervous. Okay, that's okay too. So it's an ongoing kind of conversation to make kids feel comfortable with that, and that's super important as their parent that is there too. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't hear the most positive messages from parents. Sometimes to say, listen, we're here, we have to do it, don't waste the doctor's time, and they're trying to be, like efficient or something. I'm like, no, it's okay. This should never be a forced exam, or I've heard too, like, well, you might have to hold her legs to examine her. I'm like, I'm absolutely not doing that. And no one that I work with is gonna hold your daughter's legs down to examine her. If we cannot examine her because of anxiety or previous trauma, or we're not sure why she's so nervous, then we're gonna stop. She's gonna get redressed if she even was able to get undressed in the first place with her anxiety. And if we need to do an exam, we will do it under anesthesia, because there's no reason to hold a child down to examine them. It cannot be that. This is not a life-threatening situation at this moment. If there's something you have to examine, then you can give them medication and do it that way while they're asleep. There's absolutely no reason to ever hold a child down to examine them.
Thank you. Isla?
Yes, thank you. I've been reading a lot of information about the pill, and obviously I think we can all say it's been, it's amazing, revolutionary medicine for us. However, now that there is the IUD, and I have a daughter that she's only 11 now, but having all these conversations makes me think of when she does hit puberty. I've been reading a lot about the negative effects of the pill as well. And I'd love to hear your opinion of your, amazing women up here, of the benefits of, and what you would tell a 16-year-old, no PMS issues, healthy girl. Would you say there is one, the pill is still the way to go, or would you say an IUD is the way to go? Thinking she's in a monogamous relationship, and again, there's no PMS issues. What would you recommend?
Oh yeah, I guess that's directed to me. Okay. So this is a common thing that we see as well, and I'll address the pills versus IUDs, et cetera, first, and we can talk about kind of appropriate ages for things. So it depends on what girls or teenagers need. This is also, I don't want to keep saying girls, I take care of trans boys too, that sometimes will need control of periods and birth control as well. But it depends on what teenagers need. So pills are really good for several things, and there are also a lot of people who can't take pills for various reasons. So to give you my shortened version of my full contraception counseling in the clinic, pills are great for trying to regulate periods, lead to shorter, lighter, less painful periods, and also get rid of symptoms that come with hormonal, or at least improve symptoms that come with hormonal fluctuations. Let's say someone always gets really bad migraines right before they're about to start having their period. Birth control pills, by giving them without the placebos, without the sugar pills, can help to kind of stabilize those hormone levels so that they don't have that drop in hormones that actually leads to the migraines or the other PMS symptoms, the anxiety, the mood changes, things like that. So in that same thread, it's a common misconception that the way that birth control pills are built, if you guys have seen the birth control pack, it's usually 4 rows or the circles, which confuse people sometimes. But 3 rows are hormone pills, and the last one is placebos, 7 days of placebo pills. That is actually not necessary. And what's really disappointing, and actually makes some people angry to find out, is that we've known that it wasn't necessary for a long time. However, this is how pills were initially built, and this is how they were marketed. And initially it was kind of a more societal acceptance, patriarchal thing, like, well, women have to have 7 days of bleeding every month, otherwise they'll be hysterical. Those kind of ridiculous terms. And it also made it
pretty
more
hysterical learning that.
Yeah. It also made pills more palatable because, well, if they're still bleeding 7 days a month, then it's more natural, right? I'm sorry, but none of it is actually natural, and that's okay. We're trying to override the body's natural hormonal cycle. That's why we're giving you pills. We don't want you to keep having hormonal fluctuations. We want to take over with that medication for a reason, That's how we prevent ovulation and prevent pregnancy. That's how you prevent those things like ovarian cysts. People are prone to those. That's how you prevent people from ovulating so they don't get cysts. We want to hijack the body's cycle. So actually, what I've shifted to doing in a lot of my patients is having them take fewer placebo pills than 7. You don't need 7. The body starts to kick back in at the end of that week on its own, which is not what we want, or skip them completely and do extended cycles. So they can only have a period every 2 or 3 months. You don't need more than that when you're on birth control pills. You don't need 7 days of it either. And this is a revolution for some of my patients who go, oh my God, I don't have to bleed for 8 days every 28 days. No, you actually don't. And we have these things for a reason. People with certain medical conditions or family histories cannot take birth control pills, so they're automatically off the table. Their mom had a blood clot when taking birth control pills. We will not give them birth control pills. IUDs have different benefits and have actually come a long way. A lot of the misconceptions I have to tend to sort of go against in my clinic is people coming in and saying, well, I heard that those were dangerous, or back when I got an IUD, it was sort of like a claw that went into your uterus and then caused infertility. And they're very different now. We actually, all of us at Children's who are in gynecology, wear little IUD models on our badges. Cracks the moms up. Oh my God, you have an IUD on your badge. Yeah, and do you know why? Because it's less scary this way. They can touch it and see that it's not a scary thing. The biggest barrier we still have to getting IUDs in teenagers is the pelvic exam itself, because they have to do the exam with the stirrups and the speculum, and some of these girls have never even used a tampon, much less had a speculum exam or had sex or anything like that. So that's still one of the barriers. But in terms of effects of the IUD, we know that it's the most effective, that and the implant in the arm are the most effective birth control you can get. It's actually approved as a treatment for heavy menstrual bleeding. So for girls with bleeding disorders or just heavy periods in general, IUDs are wonderful. For girls who've actually had a blood clot themselves and can't take estrogen, an IUD is wonderful because it doesn't have estrogen in it. So there's very few reasons that people can't use an IUD. Unless their uterus doesn't fit an IUD in it, most people can actually get one. And if they don't, another problem with taking birth control is that you have to take it at the same time every day. That's hard for teenagers, but it's also hard for adults. We talk about like setting an alarm and things like that, and they're like, well, I missed one, et cetera, but, and then moms kind of joke like, well, I missed my pills too, and that's why you're here. So for compliance, having something that you essentially say, set it and forget it, that lasts for 5 years is huge. Now, how old do you have to be to get an IUD? That answer is also it depends. As long as the uterus has grown to the size of basically an adult uterus, which happens once, after a few periods, really, most uteruses can accommodate an IUD. In terms of patients that will actually place an IUD in our clinic, the youngest I think we've done in somebody who was awake was 12 or 13. And that's only certain patients who are very mature and able to do that. I take care of many special needs patients who, let's say they can't take estrogen also, or pills are an issue, and an IUD is a great method for controlling their bleeding without the hormone effects in the rest of the body, and they're 10 and have been having periods for a year. That's actually not too young, and I will do those IUDs under anesthesia. So in terms of it too young to get an IUD or to start birth control pills, there actually really isn't a minimum age. If girls are having periods, we can get that started.
Can we just
you
say
so much.
too, there's other options. So IUDs and
Yes.
the implant like Nexplanon are what are most effective because they last, they're called what we call a long-acting, I can't remember.
Reversible contraception.
Reversible contraceptive. So Nexplanons usually last for 3 years, so you can get that in the arm if somebody doesn't want to get an IUD, they don't want to go through the pelvic exam, that can be a good option. The biggest thing about the Nexplanon is that they can cause sometimes people gain weight and they don't like the weight gain. IUDs tend to be more weight neutral, and then also they can have a lot of irregular periods, and the IUDs either don't have periods or the periods are pretty regular and they're very light. So that's why people may choose between those two. But then there's also still the depot injections that people can get every 3 months. Those can also cause weight gain too, but sometimes people don't gain weight on them at all. And then there's also the NuvaRing is an option for people who don't remember to take the pills every day. But it's a good option because, it's monthly, and it can be something you can control. So, say for example, you get an IUD or an Explanon and you're worried that you're not going to like it and you're going to have to get it removed. And you tried the birth control pills and they seem to be okay, but you can't remember to take them. The next one, I'm sorry, it's late. I've been up since early. So the NuvaRing can be a really good option, but it has to do, if they're comfortable with inserting something into their vaginas, so just, it can be a different conversation about, the different options.
And there's also the birth control patch, which is once a week. So if somebody likes the idea of a birth control pill and they want something that's a little easier to remember, then the patch could give the same coverage.
Thank you.
Hi, I think I'm up. Thank you all for your amazing advice. You have mentioned a lot of resources, like amongst all of you this evening, so I think it would be great if you could share in the website or an email or whatever. And then I just had a question about when girls should go to the gynecologist, like in relation to their puberty or age, or when is the point to start doing that? Thank you.
Good question.
So I think this came up before with the younger ones too. So we actually do now have a recommendation from like our national organization, the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. The recommendation currently is that girls have their first visit with a gynecologist sometime between the ages of 13 to 15. And with the caveat that doesn't mean they're getting a speculum exam at age 13. Some girls may need one, but most of the time that is just a, sort of like what I was talking before, a check-in about their general gynecologic and or sexual health. Because sometimes there are things that have arisen that haven't been addressed before or that people were told were normal. So it's good to have kind of a well check initially. Common example in the patients that I see here, a lot of girls who are gymnasts or swimmers or things like that, and they say, well, yeah, I haven't had a period in 9 months, but all the other gymnasts on the team said they don't have their periods either, and our coach said that happens to a lot of girls. Like, yes, but it's not normal, and we need to do something about that, and it's not actually a healthy thing, even though it can be justified that way because all the other girls on your team have the same problem. So part of the goals of that visit are an assessment of what their general kind of reproductive and gynecologic health is, a lot of education about period tracking, about need for birth control, about vulvovaginal hygiene, and also we talk about safe relationships. We always are doing safety screenings and making sure that people are safe in both at home and in their relationships. The timing of a first exam, I would just say there's not a specific age because it varies as to what they need, but I reassure a lot of parents that an internal pelvic exam may not be necessary for a while, but for certain things it is going to be necessary. If they're sexually active, there are checks we have to do. If there's a concern for abnormal discharge or any kind of an injury, we would have to do an exam. And then at the very latest, when they're 21 and need a pap smear. By the way, pap smears should not start before age 21. Except in certain very limited medical conditions, HIV, Fanconi anemia. That's pretty much it. Everybody else, 21 and up. So you don't need to bring your daughter at age 14 or 15 saying, well, doesn't she need a pap? This is when I got one. That's no longer the case, which is great because they can come to us and just talk. And whether we do an external check or wait and do that later, at least they're getting some information and resources and we're making sure that they're healthy.
All right, so I think you can recognize that there are many types of adult lifestyles that are like 18 plus only and are for adults only, but minors might become exposed to such lifestyles through media or social media or movies that are popularized. And so in the age of such easy access with the internet, how might a parent react to properly if they discover that a child is becoming interested in some sort of adult activity such as BDSM lifestyles that they may come across online, but may not be familiar with how to handle?
I can take that one. So I think that when we're looking at healthy relationships, everybody is going to evolve into their adolescence, into their adulthood, into their sexuality in a different way. and they may love one person, they may love multiple people, they may be involved in monogamous or polyamorous relationships, and they may choose as adults to express love in very different ways. And in the setting of consent, a relationship that is consensual, that involves toys or role playing, is different than when we are talking about minors who are exploring their sexuality. So I think Lydia's comment about consent and knowing one's body and knowing what healthy relationships and what safety is, and that, you know, sex should not hurt. When people are adults, if they would like sex to be painful and that brings pleasure, that's very different. So I think knowledge that sex should be comfortable, knowledge about consent can offset some of the exposure that young people who really aren't able or aren't ready to kind of process some of those more mature sexual relationships are exposed to. And I think if we can keep those fundamentals of safe and feeling pleasure and consent, then we can offset some of the exposure. And this is really where knowing where exposures are coming from, you know, having the ability for youth to reach out to you or to talk about, I saw this and I'm not sure what it means. You could also say to young people, there is a lot of information about sex out there. You are going to see, or you might see, a lot of things that could be really confusing to you. I'm not always going to know what you see. And I'm not always going to know exactly how to ask you what you see. So part of our job together is that I'm here for you if there's something that's confusing, or you don't understand how two people are in a relationship together, or how multiple people are in a relationship together. Those are questions you can field as a family. I don't know if you have other thoughts from an education standpoint.
I think a lot of that exposure, obviously there are some movies, we all know which movies they are, and many movies obviously portray some of these lifestyles in very dangerous ways, right? And it's not reality. It's kind of like porn in that aspect. This was created for entertainment. This is not real. 50 Shades of Grey is not what a real BDSM relationship should look like. Thank you. It's entertainment, right? The other place that I think a lot of younger people are getting it, I think specifically, would be Tumblr. And I, as soon as you said it, I was like, I know what you're talking about. So if you are a parent and you don't know what Tumblr is, bless your heart, sign up and look through it. Now, as of December, a lot of things change, but there's still a lot of access to stuff. But a lot of lifestyle things, whether it's BDSM, whether it's various different kink dynamics of sorts, a lot of it shows up there. A lot of it shows up with adolescents involved. A lot of it shows up with very young 18, 19, 20-year-olds that aren't necessarily underage, but it's still very young, right? And it's still very young to be fully into this. Again, with consent, unless you fully understand what it is, you shouldn't be consenting to it. And watching a movie or scrolling through some other Dom and Sub's Tumblr pages is not fully understanding it. And so again, as parents, it is important that we look through some of this stuff, scary as it may be for some, but it is important to know kind of what's out there. And like you're saying, you can bring some of these things up. Now, you may not get specifically into, here's the list of kinky things, have you ever heard of this and this and this? Because it'll go on for quite a while and you'll traumatize your child and yourself. But you can say, hey, so I was at this panel the other night, and one of them said there's this thing called Tumblr. Have you ever heard of it? And as soon as that panic look goes, you'll be like, oh yeah.
Yeah, you've heard of it. You've heard of it. That's your litmus test right there.
But you can say, okay, so I started looking through it, and again, don't let that panic show, because you may panic because, you know, there was some interesting stuff on there. There was some stuff that I didn't know about. Yeah. Have you ever come across stuff that you don't know about? Let's talk about this. And it's okay, it's always okay to say, I don't really know about this. I don't know about this, but Maybe we should find out, because apparently this is a thing, and I didn't know it was a thing. So, Tumblr, for those of you who don't know, and I've just ratted your children out if they haven't. You're welcome.
I just want to say real quick, too, when you're looking at a lot of this stuff, it's a lot of, you think about, this is somebody's child as well. And so how do you talk to your kids about not being in a position to be a part of this kind of thing, like when they are very young? So I think it's important to talk to the kids about like power dynamics, and even if it doesn't have anything to do with people trying to get them to do videos or anything like that, but just in general, like, if you're, we think about now in the news has been R. Kelly and, with these younger women and that sort of thing, talking to them about like, what would a 20-something-year-old person want with a teenager? Talking to them about, these things, if you meet older people, and why would they be interested in you? Because you're young and naive, so just trying to help them understand that they can date people their age, but they choose to date younger people for a reason, because they're trying to take advantage of you. So trying to talk to them about power structures, and I didn't completely answer the question about healthy relationships, but a lot of what I see a lot of young people do is that a lot of young people are very materialistic nowadays, and they think that, oh, this person is, they're getting my hair done and they're getting my nails done, because young women and even young men are obsessed with gifts and that sort of thing these days, and as long as somebody's giving them gifts, then they can do whatever they want. So it's important for them to understand that power dynamic and not to let people take advantage of you. And if you need your hair and your nails done, come and talk to your parents so we can try to get you a job, or we can, we can work some things out, but you don't have to feel like you need to do things in order to get, something out of it.
All right, I actually got 2 questions. By the way, it's me again. I was there last time. So I got 2 questions. My first question is this right here. It's kind of weird because my wife is a consultant, but she was kind of nervous of getting up and asking the question.
That's okay.
The second question, it kind of hit a nerve real quick, but I'm going to ask the first question first. My wife put that, so saving your virginity for your first, which should be a big deal, why introduce a vibrator to your children? Why, to your daughter or your son or whatever situation?
Say that, repeat that again.
So saving your virginity for that
first one,
for the first one, a special person, whoever it might be, why introduce a vibrator to them? Why, I mean, I have a very open house. My house is very
so
jokey.
you're saying, are you saying,
like a
if you are saving yourself, why would you use a vibrator?
Why would you use a vibrator to lose your? Why would you lose your virginity to a vibrator or a pocket, whatever, instead of losing it to that? She's waiting.
I'm waiting.
Go ahead.
I got you.
I got one more question after that goes for you too, though. But.
Virginity is a term that has been used in absurd and harmful and damaging ways. We don't have a name for the first time you kiss someone, right? We don't have a big, hung up, thin name for the first time you hold hands with someone, but we do about, usually, virginity only relates to the first time a penis goes in a vagina, right? And that's not accurate. Virginity, the word virginity simply means you've never had sex. Well, sex can be defined in very many different ways. So, many people do define masturbation as sex because it's a solo sexual act. Others don't. It's such a all-over definition. Not all masturbation, especially with vibrators, are internal. So there may not even be anything that goes inside anyway, because for most vaginas, that's not how you orgasm. And really, internal orgasm from vaginal penetration, it's really because the clitoris wraps around the vagina and it's still clitoral stimulation. It's all clitoral. So that's why most vibrators and many, there's usually clitoral stimulation. So again, that's not even like a penetrative thing. We don't think of an adolescent wearing a tampon as losing their virginity, do we? But somehow if it's a penis, it's different. So the other important thing is, and we haven't had I have a 13-year-old, we haven't had when you're ready to have sex, because right now she thinks French kissing is No, she's just realized that maybe it's not gross. I take that back. Other things she still thinks are pretty gross. However, I fully believe, and I recognize not everybody will, that you are not ready to have sex until you have masturbated and until you can masturbate, because saving yourself, and if you are wanting to save, I'm not even using the term save, if you are wanting to wait until marriage to have sex for the first time, that's awesome. You're allowed to do that, right? It's not bad. I'm not saying you shouldn't. If you're wanting to wait to have sex until whatever your thing is, again, that's fine. But it is not up to the other person to teach you what feels good. You have to teach them. And so if we are saying that you can't also masturbate until after you've had your first sexual experience with someone else, that can be very damaging and can be hurtful. You know your body better than anybody else. You should know your body better than anybody else. So a vibrator does not lose virginity, just like a tampon doesn't. I have an issue with the term virginity anyway, but especially if it's a religious thing, and I come from a very conservative religious background, I recognize that, again, that may be your family value, right? And you can share your family values. This is what I believe. I'm sorry. But again, your children still are going to make their own choices, and you have to prepare them for that. But a vibrator does not lose virginity. It does not take virginity. All right?
All right, one more. Now this is for the fathers out here. This is another question. This is a serious question. You actually hit a nerve for me, because I have 2 daughters and 2 sons. So 1 out of 4 and 1 out of 6. The odds in my household is great. Let's just be honest. If you look at it that far, I'm not saying that, you know what I mean? So,
Yep.
But I feel like the question, I understand the whole consent thing, but sexual assault is when people go against their consent anyway. I've been around some monsters for a very long time in my life. I ain't gonna go in my past and all this other crap. But how do you prevent that with so much space they have, so much social media, so much privacy these kids are allowed to have now these days? Because mine is basically 13, 15, 16, and 17. So how do you prevent that? How do you prevent that? Like, so with everything, with all the odds against our children now these days, all odds are against our kids when it comes to a situation like that. Let's just be honest. But how do you prevent that from happening to our children too? I know the consent thing, you said it knocks it down 50%, but all sexual assaults is basically against people's consent anyway.
I think that part of it is just teaching them to be strong in when they don't consent. Like if they don't feel comfortable with something, like number one, like, do I want to do this? If somebody's trying to do something with them and they don't feel like they want to do it, then leave. That's the number one thing. A lot of people, they've never really thought about what they would do if somebody didn't respect their boundaries, so they freeze. And so teaching them how to not freeze and be, strong and, I don't really want to do this. I'm going to leave right now. And if they have to be forceful, because I have experienced this before where I had to say, do you want to fight right now? Because I told you no, and they're like, so you have to teach them how to stand up for themselves and also teach them how to stand up for other people. Because what happens to a lot of people is they could be assaulted when they're drunk and that sort of thing. I went to Ohio State, so I've seen plenty of super drunk people stumbling around. And I remember one time there was a girl coming out of a club, and she was walking past a group of guys on the patio, and they were all looking at her, and she's stumbling around. And I walked her next to the police officer and said, you're going to get in a taxi. I don't know where she was going. I don't know why her friends let her go and get a taxi by herself. But I stood there with her and said, you need to stand here and not be with anybody else, but there's a nice police officer right next to you. He's going to wait for you to get in a taxi. And so they did. So you have to teach them also not to be a bystander and allow things to happen to people, but also how to stick up for themselves.
As a parent, too, it's really important to let your kids know, too, that you are a safe person for them, and that they're able to call you if they feel like they're in an unsafe situation. So this is something that I think, like you were saying, a lot of us are taught, whether or not it's on purpose or just inadvertently, that if you're uncomfortable in a situation, it's not polite to leave, or it's not polite to say that I don't like to be here and I want to go. So if your kids know, it's they're lucky to have caring parents like you guys. If they know that if they're in a situation that they're like, I don't feel comfortable here, they can call you and you'll come and pick them up, no questions asked. Or if your kid is at a sleepover and realizes that they don't want to be there anymore, it's not like they have to stay to be polite. Like, no, you call me, I will come and get you at 2 a.m, because it is okay to leave a situation that you are not comfortable in, and I will be the one to come and get you. And if you are at a party that maybe you weren't supposed to be at, I will come and get you from that party, and we can discuss it tomorrow if there's repercussions of what that means. But to know, for your kids to know that they have somebody that they can go to say, like, I don't feel safe and I want to get out of here, that's a really important lesson to teach them as well. Can I add to your virginity question, just as a gynecologist? So I completely agree. I teach a lot of my patients that virginity is a social construct. And in response to parents' questions where they say, can you check her out down there and let me know if she's ever done anything? I always tell people that there is actually not a test for virginity. There's not an exam you can do to see if somebody has ever had sex or not. And that the hymen is not something that gets disrupted the first time that people have sex. If so, that's because they have a congenital anomaly where it never opened up in the first place. When girls are born, the hymen is open. There is an opening for blood to leave when they have periods. There's no breaking of the hymen. There's no tearing of the hymen. Some girls are born with extra tissue there that keeps them from using tampons, and we surgically resect that. That's totally different. But when they place a tampon, when they first have sex, if they put a finger in there, that doesn't disrupt anything with the hymen, and I think that's a really important thing to kind of understand, and for girls to know too about themselves, that no one can actually look at them and know if they've had sex or not.
And what you were saying about some people just being monsters, basically, unfortunately, that's the case. And that's why, we can say we maybe can have the statistic, but there are some just truly evil people. Yeah. And there are some cases that all the preventative measures we can try to do may not happen. And so that's why it is so critical that we can be people that our children can come to, because part of having that is because many times sexual assault is where somebody kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing, or somebody was drinking, and there is a level of, there are many cases of sexual assault that if this person had learned, this is not okay, we don't do this is not how we treat people, some of that can be taken care of. But like you said, there are some terrible people out there, and in this case, kind of the different things, and having, looking out for your friends and watching, who are you around and trusting those instincts, sometimes are all you can do, and just we have to be there for our children if something. If they're threatened? Well, and in that case, that's a sort of situation where you kind of never know until you're in that situation. We have fight, flight, or freeze that kicks in, and that's why for some people who are sexually assaulted, they don't do anything. And then later they go, why didn't I do anything? Well, their body's in like complete panic mode, and other people fight back, and other people try to run, and it's just our very basic level of our brain that's kicking in when there's danger, and we kind of are out of control of that.
But I think that one thing to know is that most people who are sexually assaulted by either an intimate partner, like their ex-boyfriend, their ex-girlfriend, their current wife or partner. So 8 out of 10 people are sexually assaulted by people that they know. So it can be a family member, it can be a friend of somebody, a classmate. It's usually people that they know. It's not usually people getting, grabbed and taken into the alley, that sort of thing. That's about 15%. So it's usually if it's somebody that you know, and if the way that I think about it is that whatever kind of situation you're going to be in, most of the time you're going to be able to try to get out of that situation if you feel strong enough, because most of the people are sexually assaulted in their own house, or most people are sexually assaulted in their own home or near their own home. So trying to make them feel assertive in their own home, trying to make them feel empowered to try to get out of situations, and trying to help them recognize the signs. And a lot of times you can tell if somebody isn't going to respect your boundaries when you're kissing or doing a lot of things. Don't go take them to your house. You know, so it's like you can, in like text messaging, like people constantly like texting you, like they have those commercials where people aren't respecting your boundaries when you say I'm busy and they're just harassing you, that sort of thing. How are they going to be respecting your boundaries if you say, no, I don't want to kiss, or no, I don't want to do anything? So just trying to teach them more about the signs before you make it to the bedroom. Or make it even to your house, because just because, you know, so you invite somebody to your house doesn't mean that they're going to make it to the bedroom, but just helping them understand that if they are not respecting your boundaries before they make it to your house, do not bring them to your house.
All right, we have the last two questions here. So,
Really quick, I just want to thank you guys so much for spreading the message of, I think the most important thing is just providing a safe place where children know that they're loved and that they're safe and that they can have open conversations. I just want to offer 2 resources as a consultant that I give to a lot of parents who are like, how do I even start these conversations? Amaze.org, have you guys heard of this? Like quick video clips for kids to adolescents that explain, I mean, everything, consent, gender identity, sexuality, just all kinds of things. And it's quick videos that kids can watch with their parents and then start a conversation. Probably parents should watch them first, just so you have
They did just come out with a downloadable coloring book for the little ones to have some of these conversations. That just came out today.
Didn't know that. Thank you. And then for adolescent-specific, sexetc.org, or maybe it's .com, so SEXETC, and a lot of those articles are actually written by adolescents, so it's a little bit more relatable because it's from their peers. And I wanted to know if you guys had any other coloring books or...
Scarletine.
Scarletine.
That one is actually, it is very thorough, and it's designed for adolescents and young adults, answers a whole slew of different things, but it's really good information even for adults, especially with some of the different terminology that's floating out there. You know, if you're not sure about, okay, well, gender this is what, but gender this is what, and I can't keep this straight. They go through, you know, it's a lot of good explanations, but Scarletine, I think it's .org.
Oh,
I don't know. You probably just, that word is a good one too.
Thank you so much.
thank you.
So we talked a lot about the social constructs of virginity and that being kind of a, you know, not the best word anymore. But I don't think we really discussed what other people term slut shaming. I think it's really important as a parent of 3 grown boys. I have everything different. One that's only had one partner that's engaged to that partner. They're each other's only and will be each other's only. One that's not done anything and he's in his 2nd year of college and just has no desire. And another one that's a little too promiscuous. So that's the question that I kind of want like an example dialogue, you know, because that juxtaposition is there, you know, like how do we, I mean, I really did want them to remain virgins, you know what I mean, as long as possible, not till marriage, but until they kind of understood themselves and knew what they wanted. And I really do educate women on, especially with children, because that question really hit me with what he said. One of the main things I always explain to them is you can have, you know, masturbation with toys that's external, you know, and you don't have to worry about what people might think of as breaking the hymen, you know. You don't have to have internal, you have to learn your body externally first, you know, and they're more comfortable with that idea when I have virgins at parties and things like that. So I feel like that's a really great way to kind of start them slow, but what do you do when they've gone too far with their, you know, sexual confidence and, you know, because I'm sorry, STDs are a real thing. I mean, you know, and I don't care if they are covered enough. You can still get other stuff, you know, and so I'm really not okay with my oldest being this way. You know what I'm saying? So what's the conversation example, like a dialogue that you might say to them? Not easy.
I'll start, yeah. So, again, I highly recommend Al Vernacchio's book, For Goodness Sex. It addresses some of that, but talking specifically about whether you choose to have one partner or more partners, whether or not you choose to have sex within a relationship, whoever you are having sex with, you still have to trust and respect that person, and they have to trust and respect you. Because, again, it's a give and take. you have to respect their boundaries, and if they're gonna say no, you stop. You have to trust that they'll do the same. So really, there should be a level, and obviously it wouldn't be the same level necessarily of trust, well, not necessarily. It would not be the same level of trust and respect as you would have with someone in a, 5-year relationship, but there still has to be some level of that, because if you're just going into and especially like going into a sexual encounter drunk, again, you can't fully consent in that. They cannot consent, you cannot consent, and for a lot of, I was gonna say adolescents, for a lot of people, that's what we do, is you go to a bar and you get drunk and you go home with someone, but again, you can't fully consent in that case. You have no basis, you haven't really talked to them to even gauge, can I trust that this person is gonna, back off if I say so. So at least that level, I think that's some of the conversation you can have. And again, they may just be like, yeah, mom, whatever. But when we're having these conversations, because as someone who did the same a long time ago, I look back now and go, oh crap, now my daughter's 13, what do I tell her? Because I don't want her to do this, right? But again, how do I say it without sounding shamey? And think about the conversations that people had with me. My parents didn't, because in our house, you knew that a penis went in a vagina, but you don't do it till you're married, and that's all we knew. But other people that talked to me, now I look back, and even though I wasn't always listening at that time, I go, they were right, and I'm glad they talked to me, even if I didn't listen to them now, because it still has affected who I've become as an adult. Yeah. And so it is hard when you're in the middle of that and you're watching your child do this, but some of these lessons can be ongoing.
Well, the problem is the more promiscuous, I think, and it goes hand in hand, and it may not be the case for everyone, but I think the more promiscuous you get, the less respect you start to have for yourself, because you start to give it out a little too freely. And if you're doing it outside of actual relationships and things like that, and even though we're not discussing that, and I haven't heard it yet, I think it's still a real thing. I mean, when you've been too promiscuous throughout your life, there's a point in your time that you're going to feel a bit regretful, because those didn't have meaning, you know what I'm saying? And I think that with sex should come meaning. I don't think it should be something you do casually and freely, but I may be more of a traditionalist,
And you can share that value.
Yeah,
this is what I believe
yeah.
about it, right? And it's important, again, and maybe they're not going to give you an answer, but to say, what are you getting out of it?
What's up with
what
the
is
sex?
your reason?
Yeah.
Does it make you feel good?
Is it pleasure? Is it that you like what it feels like when you orgasm? Do you need to do that with a partner? Do you get that same feeling by yourself? Tell me about these people that you're having sex with. Are you having conversations beforehand? What do you know about them? What do they know about you? To kind of start to challenge this a little bit. And like Lydia and Dr. Shomo have said, planting those seeds definitely you can start to lay the groundwork for having these conversations. But I think it's challenging to find that balance between feeling empowered about your body, being able to express yourself, and then, do the decisions that we make sometimes come from places of low self-esteem or low confidence? Are we using sex as a way to express something, to express sadness, frustration, anger? So, kind of gets down into the core of the why. And for some teenagers, it is just, it feels good. Okay, so then it feels good. Here are some of the good parts about it. Here are some of the not so good parts about it. And then are there other things that could feel equally as good? So you could explore it that way too.
The other thing I was going to say is that sometimes you can get the opposite happen. Like I had a young woman who I was taking care of. I used to do school-based health, and she was telling me that she had a partner who wasn't really treating her right. He was having sex with multiple girls in the school. She was getting, tested for STDs, and I'm like, this isn't, what we want for you. We don't want you to have this kind of experience. If you know that he's not being good to you, then why do you keep going back? And she said, well, if I've had two boyfriends and two sexual partners before I'm 16, then I'm going to be a hoe. And I'm like, what? You know, so this is the perception that some of them may have, is that even if somebody is not treating you right, because that's your first person and you have one partner, that you should put up with anything that they're giving you. So just having those conversations about respecting yourself and respecting other people, you don't want people to treat you in a bad way, and you don't want to treat other people in a bad way as well. So unfortunately, she ended up getting pregnant by this guy, so, but she's doing okay. But it's just rough, a lot of times these young people, the messages they get from their friends and all types of other people can be the wrong message both ways.
And none of this is easy. Oh my gosh, none of this is easy. None of these conversations are easy. None of these dialogues are easy. They are, they're hard, and you have to have them over and over again. It does get easier, the more you have them.
And it's okay to let them know that. My husband walked into the 13-year-old's room and said, this is going to be a really uncomfortable conversation, but we're going to have it. And it's okay to say that. Like, this is awkward. This is going to suck for both of us because I feel awkward about it as well. We can be honest with our kids. Yeah, I'm getting used to this as well.
Never done this before.
Right. Yeah. This is new to me also.
They don't give you a book on this.
All right, let's give our doctors and Lydia a big round, educators a big round of applause.
Awesome. Aww. That's really nice.
These are uncomfortable sometimes topics, and there's a lot of information here tonight, a ton of information. But what it really boils down to is getting comfortable having communication with your child. And it's sometimes not easy. But you know what? I appreciate every single one of you who came out here tonight and have participated, and it's colder than crap in here. But I appreciate you. You asked amazing questions. We did give you a sheet of paper. If we didn't get to your question, please write it down. We're going to place it up on the internet for you to be able to see your question, and we'll have our doctors here and also our educator to be able to fill those questions. Same thing. I mean,
well, I don't think I got quite a bit more school on me. It's not the same thing.
No, but I'm going to tell you what. You blew my mind away the very first night I met you. And I think, I think you're amazing. I really do. You've got a lot to offer our community, and I'm sure some of the physicians learned a lot from you here tonight. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the panel. I appreciate this, being able to have this venue and to bring everybody here. So fill out the forms. We will be answering your questions. And let me tell you something. Get your phones out. Get your phones out. Our next one will take place on July 9th. We do not have the place yet, and it'll be air conditioned. We will take this feeling with us. And then this conversation is what you've asked for, and this is to be able to explore sex during and after menopause. So you won't want to miss it, and we need for you to get registered now. What I would like for you to do is, when you leave here tonight, pay this information forward, because I'm grateful and thankful, and I have got some amazing, amazing pure romance gifts for you here tonight. So you can go home and have fun now.
So I actually put myself out there, and people contact me and email me and everything. So I have a website, www.drshomonknows.com. I have a YouTube channel where people ask me questions or comment. People email me and ask me questions, that sort of thing. So I do it kind of as a hobby, because I really, want people to have the information that they need. And, talk about puberty, all types of stuff, so.
I'm going to tell you what, there's going to be a lot of these girls. You will have so many questions and fans. I can't even tell you. They're going to be online tonight telling everybody about this. So, you know, again, give them a big round of applause and thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you.